I would like to talk to you about a good character. A good character who applies Hydro with no normal attacks being required, and it's Hydro that's, mostly single target, but also a little bit AoE. And this character has, good buffing capabilities, but these buffing capabilities are restricted. There's a downside, right? There's a downside to get the upside of the character has to be paired with certain kinds of other characters in order to get their buffing utility. I'm talking about Aino. Yeah. I'm starting the Aino is good video with comparing her to Furina. This is a good character. Also, she is free. That's like I think a really important context to understand in trying to evaluate this character. I do not think she crazily changes the landscape of Genshin per se. Not like directly in the same way where like Furina changed the landscape of Genshin by being a universal damage bonus buffer and, synergizing with healers. But like on the topic of like me pointing out how, the conditionality of Aino being good and like getting full buffing utility functionally from her is a little bit indirect compared to like how Furina is, and requires another non-cry unit, right? But so right now, with the start of Nogcry being, we only have Lauma, Anefa, and then Aino existing, she's at her worst she will ever be for her utility in the game, and as they release more Nogcry units, though, she will only grow. Obviously, Furina started a little bit better, considering, one, she's a 5-star Archon that they were trying to sell. They ain't really trying to sell that much with Aino, and then, there was more healers in the game, right? Furina, I think, is a better character than Aino, don't get me wrong. But she's not a bad character, and that's why I'm so kind of, like, annoyed, is, like, so much of the community, I see people just, like, in a random, like, discussion thread, someone's, like, a genuine question, how good is Aino? And then there's just responses, she's bad, she's garbage. No, she's not. The reason is because she is a Hydra unit and she can do a bunch of EM buffing. The reason she can do a bunch of EM buffing is not directly in her kit, but more just because of the the stupid racism mechanics. And yes, it's this artifact set, but one of the interesting things is actually not just this artifact set on its own, it's this artifact set and the fact that Aino doesn't have to be the one that uses it. And I'm going to use, because this is the main context we have available right now that's relevant, Anefa and Aino combo together, right? So Anefa Aino combo together enables the full buff of this artifact set, which is a 120 EM, and if the character does off-field elemental damage, this buff is just basically up permanently. This is the 5-star instructor set that we've always wanted. Oftentimes this set, just because it gives 120 EM to the team, could end up being like the best artifact set to use on Bennett in some teams, for example, and many other characters. This artifact set is basically a 5-star version of it, so you can get, better substat quality, and it's 2-piece ER, which is a lot better for building on, supportive characters. To get the same 120 EM you get from instructors, though, you need to, use 2 non-cry units. But as mentioned before, this set can be used on characters other than Aino. So the ideal situation, which I'm not actually going to be able to show you in this video because the set just came out, I got poopy options for it. I don't have any good double crit pieces, but when I do in the future, my intention for like the Aino Anefa combo, have a good crit based build on Anefa, right? Because she does good damage and she also likes having ER to burst consistently. And then Aino, because she's so trivial to build to burst consistently and doesn't really do meaningful damage herself, put on instructors. So with 2 non-cry units, what Aino functionally does is buff the team EM by 240 in like optimized context. But if you just want to keep things simple and put her just on this artifact set, just the 120 EM alone is actually pretty good too, and like keeping my Anefa on Gilded Dreams build is what I'm going to be showing you in this video. To be clear, by the way, without any other non-cry units, I think just the fact that Aino does 1 Hydra application every 3 seconds without normal attacks and is just completely trivial to build, like on a really, really low investment casual player level, this character is more usable than someone like Singcho for just enabling teams to function, not like to a level where they're like, oh, you're using them for endgame. But if you are a casual player who just needs a Hydro unit to make reactions work properly, because Hydra's pretty dang important, she's not going to fuel your Hu Tao to get vaporizes every second, but like long, long gone are the days where we have needed, for most teams, where we have needed a ton of Hydra application, and oftentimes it's just more important on a team building level to have the element at all. And anyways, so having the element at all and having buffing potential is like so much more important on team building level, and that actually extends to endgame. But on a very casual perspective, this character is also really good, and it's really cool that they're giving a free Hydra unit that's competent and easy to build. The core baseline though, like if we look at 2 unit core, and I know people are gonna be like, oh, this is the strength of an Efa, but it's not. I know. I'm gonna rant about this for a second. Sorry, because I'm so sick of the rhetoric sometimes where people like try to deny a potential character being useful, like, because of the fact that it's like hinges on their pairing with some other character. Because it's a team-based video game. Like you don't play characters alone. No character in this game actually exists in a vacuum. We don't evaluate characters by their utility on their own. We evaluate them by their synergy with other units. And yes, she's restricted to being paired with non-cry units for her like true endgame utility. It is what it is. It'll grow over time. I mentioned it before. Whatever. Sorry, I'm repeating the same things. I'm just get annoyed at people like. No, I want to be clear. Like, don't get me wrong. There's legitimate reasons I'm going to go over why you might want to not like invest a ton of resources into Aino. Right, my Aino is level 60, and the footage you're going to see later is actually going to be her at level 40. This character is very useful on a very low investment level, can reach most of her utility with almost 0 resources. The overall point that I want to have, just looking at the context of Aino with Enefa. Now, Enefa is a character that has a shield, and then she does good damage mostly through this passive. And then she has a buff of her own that buffs EM based on her attack. I easily get over 3k attack on my Enefa build after, some combat buffs happen. And so Enefa can buff her own EM and the on-field EM by 6% of 3k, which is a total of 180 EM. And then you add on top of that team-wide EM buff from this artifact set of 120, and then another 120 from instructors potentially if we're optimizing things down. Although I would probably have a little bit less attack if I put Enefa on this set versus Gilded Dreams. So the important thing there is like for the on-fielder, how much EM buffing is that total from these 2 units as a team core, right? Because you can do whatever you want because at a baseline, right? Hydro plus Electro. These are useful auras that you can have on enemies that can be used to trigger other reactions. If you have a Pyro unit, you can trigger Vaporize and Overload. With a Dendro unit, you can trigger Quicken, Spread, Aggravate, and Bloom, right? And Enefa can trigger Hyper Blooms after you generate those. Yada yada, yappity yap, right? In case you somehow have missed it, you like Hydro is kind of one of the strongest enabling elements in the game. This is a big part of what makes Aino strong, right? And the total EM buffing potential of these 2 units together, right, is in the neighborhood of like a 400 elemental mastery buff, when you min-max it. And that's at Aino C0, by the way. Aino C1 is another 80 EM. And then C2, by the way, is additional Hydra application, which could matter. But honestly, you don't really have to stress getting Aino constellations that much. I plan to try to get Aino C2 because I want to have the extra Hydra application. But I've been able to use her at C0 perfectly fine so far. Maybe I think I actually have a better appropriate comparison in mind. Like, think about a second, what does Sucrose do that's so strong? Sucrose, of course, does EM buffing, the same kind of buffing that Aino can do when paired with another non-cry. But the other buff Sucrose does is an artifact set buff through being an animal unit. She can do a VV swirl and give Red Shred, and Red Shred is a really strong buff. But you know what else is really strong? Being Hydro. Like, just being Hydro, right? Like, with how many kits... We'll use you as an example. With how many kits nowadays are just designed in a level of like needing some amount of the elemental application, and ideally that application being off field. Like, Aino doesn't need to have Xingqiu level application to be a good character, right? This is what annoys me when we've had like this discourse about like, because I have complained in the past about how MiHoYo has failed to release particularly compelling low investment options for Hydra units. I really like Candace's kit, but like finding the situations where Candace's kit is truly like something you can utilize on a team building level, like Candace is not that strong of a character. She is one of my favorite characters, but like I get the problem of Xingqiu existing as such a good Hydro unit is that how do they make Hydro units that are good but not overpowered and accessible characters? Well, they make characters like Aino, right? And like I can't express enough how much I have found that like part of what makes Furina valuable is just the simple aspect of applying Hydro without normal attacks like Xingqiu and Yelan does. And like Kokomi, people consider a unit that is good because she applies Hydro every 2 seconds from her skill. But Kokomi is really awkward to use, has kind of bad uptime, and like, anyways, and also is a 5-star. Aino does the same application as Kokomi does, but then actually has real buffing potential, unlike Kokomi, in my opinion. This isn't me trying to slam Kokomi. Kokomi has her value, right? But like, people consider Kokomi a good character, and Aino has a lot of the baseline of what Kokomi does, but in my experience and testing so far, better. It's just she kind of has fallen by the wayside as I get other Hydro options, right? And as I become a better player and more open to the idea of like, you know, less defensive utility, whereas when I was a earlier player, I wanted more defensive utility. Yada yada, yappity yap. They're giving defensive utility in so many random kits. Like Anefa is a really good damage dealer, and like a better off-field damage dealer than most other off-field damage dealers in the game, and she gives defensive utility and a buff. Like, this is just like, honestly, I think the fact that Aino is as good as she is and is a free character is actually, if anything, a sign of the power creep. Like, I think if we go back 2 years, there's no reality where they would have given this level of a character for free, like assuming that the same artifact sets and whatever existed, right? Like, there is clearly some power creeping happening, but in this case, like, this is power creep that's just good for the player base. Now, before I show some footage of using Aino and Anefa together and making direct comparison to Aino in place of Furina in a team I really enjoy, as well as Aino in place of Yelan for Arlecchino, on a like meta level, I wanna mention a couple things. First of all, is the aforementioned like reason to not invest heavily into her is I and many other people's assumptions is that Aino for, you know, whatever non-cry unit is likely to be replaced, like as far as the best in slot Hydro option, by Columbina, right? This is on the assumption that Columbina is a Hydro support. So the fact that Columbina is going to be coming out and presumably replace Aino is why you might not care to like level 9 here. And that's fine. Like I said earlier, a low investment Aino is going to be a very, very functional character. You're going to see Aino being level 40 and being functional. And if you did not pull a Nefa, you know, the cases on a meta level where you use Aino is going to be Flynn's coming out, and then you can, of course, pair her with Lauma. The problem with pairing Aino and Lauma together is not anything with Aino, is actually Lauma has a weird passive in that her buff she gives for Bloom, you lose the Bloom critting buff if you pair her with 2 non-cries and gain Lunar Bloom crit and crit damage, which Lunar Bloom damage only happens through Lauma's hold skill. This presumably is intended on a level of, you know, Lauma being a buffer for a future Lunar Bloom on-field main DPS, like how Flynn's is an on-field, you know, Lunar Charge DPS. And for that future unit, Aino will probably be a very good teammate. In fact, she may even be literally better at C0 than Yelan. For someone like Flynn's, Aino is basically an alternative to Yelan at C0, like really similar, and then with Constellations, she is just definitely better for Flynn's, right? And part of this, by the way, is as well as with the teams I'm actually going to show you, is her low cooldown. She has a 14-second cooldown, and the burst lasts 14 seconds. So for doing shorter rotation things, that's a strong utility that she has over someone like Yelan, and actually in many ways over someone like Furina. Furina can be a character that can adapt to doing like 15-second rotations, but it requires like doing a skill every other rotation and having extra energy on her to be able to do the burst every rotation. Aino is someone that's not that hard to get her to the point of being able to do, you know, 15-second rotations. She generates energy on her skill cast, by the way, not over time like Furina does. Candace kind of did some of the similar things before. If you had Candace C6, and I really like the Candace C6, you know, Anefa Arlecchino team, but it was also definitely kind of awkward to play. Aino just, it just feels a lot better to play, and it's just meaningfully stronger. On a specialty level in single target, Yelan I think is still better than Aino, but I'm not exactly sure how that changes with Constellations. But don't you worry, I will be doing a direct comparison to Aino after this. If theater is something you care about, she should be very good for theater. And by the way, level 7ing a character, for anyone that's not aware as far as like resources go, is about 1 million Mora and 170 heroes with, and also a little bit of resin for these materials. And if you don't care about trying to level her to 70 for Imaginarium theater, then like again, you can have her be level 40, level 50, whatever you want her to be leveled up to for her tankiness. You don't really have to level her past 40 because you only need this passive. This passive is useless because she doesn't actually do damage. Anyways, I think I've been yapping enough. Like, I just think it's actually crazy. I think it's kind of insane though. Just calling a free character bad when Aino has the ability, with conditionality, to buff as much as she does and can apply the most like important elements of the game. I'm literally seeing people calling her like garbage, and it's like she's going to be best in slot for Flynn's. For me, it's the Anefa and Aino team core being flexible and balanced in a way that, like, there are some team cores, right? Like, I would say Furina and Ishkofie is one of these team cores where, like, I don't like that team core as much because it doesn't, I don't know, it just doesn't have that right, like satisfaction to me. It doesn't feel like you're taking advantage of the game's mechanics. Whereas Anefa and Aino together is much more satisfying mechanically. You're using, elemental reactions in an enjoyable way. Didn't just like, oh, it's just an overpowered combo, right, that they sold together. Instead, it's just a well-balanced combo that has strengths and downsides to how you can utilize them in different team contests. And, like, yeah, if you don't have two non-cries, then on an endgame level, she's kind of a bad character, duh. If you don't have good healers for Furina's kind of a garbage character, too. I like that we got a cool free character, and I think you should be happy about it too, even if you're not going to be able to utilize it right now until like you get a non-cry units relevant to pair with her. I think Aino truly shines, of course, if you have off-field units to pair with her, because then it becomes a team core that you can adapt around with different on-fielders. Having her Hydro application and then the buffing potential is useful. That's all it is. Yada yada. Let's move on to the footage of the direct comparison. This is not going to have much commentary over it. I'm just going to let it be for what it is. I'll probably have text on screen clarifying some things. Let me know your thoughts on Aino. Most people are going to get value from her once they, get a main DPS or whatever, but just keep in mind the potential off-field synergies in the future, or maybe, I don't know, if you like what you see from the footage in this video, maybe consider pulling an F on a rerun. She's a pretty cool character, but anyways, just have fun with the game. It's a video game. Oh god, was that better than I got with the Yelan? AoE Hydro matters. was pretty quick. By the way, that was a C6 Yelan with R4 Aqua, and no, I did not power down her artifacts. It's not like the most incredible build or anything, but, you know, it's still a pretty good one. Okay, well, I'm glad Yelan C6 beats Aino there. There we go. That was a very optimal Furina clear. That was pretty good, considering I saved energy for the next chamber. That's about as ideal a situation I could ever ask for with this team, good lord. Or with this chamber, not this team. gosh, that was a really good clear, but it could have been meaningfully better if I just had my burst on Dehya. That's so funny. That's what I get for not activating C4 yet, I suppose. Yeah, I'm sorry for hiding that. That was C6 Yelan from you. I just thought that it would be funny. Oh dear. Yup, Aino in AoE can be better than C6 Yelan. That's an unfavorable comparison to Yelan, but I also showed, in a single target situation, Yelan being better. I will say, actually, Aino felt more consistent than Yelan did to me. Hopefully you enjoyed. Bye.